Welcome back. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know we're now on transport in cells of topic 1 in cell biology. Today we're going to look at osmosis, together with some tips, linking words and exam questions. Osmosis is a special type of diffusion. It has 2 parts to it. It is the movement of water molecules, and the movement is across a partially permeable membrane. Let's have a look at the water molecules first. When we think of water molecules, we should think of water concentration. The water concentration refers to the amount of water compared to all the other dissolved molecules in the water. These dissolved molecules can be things like sugars and salts, and these sugars and salts are better known as solutes. Let's have a look at an example with some fruit squash. If we have the same amount of water, but we have different amount of fruit squash, we can look at the 2 examples. One looks much darker, the other one looks much paler. So if it has a large amount of fruit squash, it means it has a smaller amount of water content compared to the fruit squash. So that means it is concentrated. The other example is much paler, and that means it must have less fruit squash, which means it has more water content compared to the molecules of fruit squash. That makes this solution more dilute. Now let's have a look at the other key factor of osmosis, the partially permeable membrane. Permeable means to allow substances to pass through. Partially means to allow some substances to pass through. Here you can see the partially permeable membrane. You can see in the diagram 2 different types of particles. We have the sugar molecules, which are the larger ones and represented as purple, and the other smaller molecules, which are the water molecules. We need to now look at which one is the concentrated side and which one is the dilute side. On side A, we can see we have more solute molecules. It also shows we have less water molecules. On side B, we have less solute molecules, but more water molecules. If we were to define osmosis, we would say it is the movement of water molecules from a high concentration to an area of low water concentration. So it's going from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration. Side B has the area of high water concentration, and side A has the area of low water concentration. So our movement would be going from side B to side A. The movement is shown by the arrow. Water molecules would be moving in this direction. If you're doing the higher tier biology, you will need to be familiar with 3 key terms. You will need to know the meanings and how they affect the animal and the plant cell. The 3 key terms are hypertonic, hypotonic and isotonic. For each of these 3 key terms, we must relate the concentration of the solute with the concentration of the cell. If we look at this diagram here, we can see the round black circle representing the cell and the area outside representing the solute concentration. For hypertonic, if the concentration of the solute is higher on the outside, that means the water content is lower on the outside. So the water will move out of the cell to the surrounding area, and that will make the cell shrink. So red blood cells crenate, which means that the red blood cells shrink and shrivel, the effect it has on plant cells is that the cytoplasm will move away from the cell wall, and the term used for that is flaccid. The next example is hypotonic. In hypotonic, the solute concentration inside of the cell is more concentrated than outside of the cell, in which case the water moves in the opposite direction, so it moves from the solute inside the cell, and this makes the cell expand. The effect it has in an animal cell is that it makes the cell burst, or we can call this lysis. The reason for that is because once the cell is full and it starts to push against the cell membrane, it makes the cell membrane break and burst the cell. The effect it has on plant cells, it pushes against the sides of the plant. The plant has a cell wall that protects the cell from bursting. Cell becomes turgid. The key terms here: hypertonic, cell shrinks for animals and flaccid for plants. Hypotonic, cell bursts or goes through lysis for animal cells, becomes turgid for plant cells. The next term is isotonic. Isotonic means the solute concentration is same inside and outside of the cell. This makes the cell stay the same. For example, the red blood cell stays the same because the concentration inside the cell is same as the concentration on the outside of the cell. And same with the plant cell, it stays the same because the concentration inside of the cell is same as that of the outside of the cell. A tip to distinguish between hypertonic and hypotonic is that when you're outside, you would be more hyper than you would be inside. So that means the solute concentration would be higher outside. So you can relate the word hyper to outside, and remember that the solute concentration would be higher on the outside. The exam questions. Question 1. What type of molecules move by osmosis? Two things we need to remember about osmosis is that it's to do with water molecules, and it moves from a high concentration of water molecules to a low concentration of water molecules, as well as remembering that it needs to move through a partially permeable membrane. The type of molecules are water molecules. Part B, describe the net movement of the molecules. For this part, we must mention the concentration of the water molecules and the partially permeable membrane. So we will write osmosis is the movement of water molecules across a partially permeable membrane from an area or a region of high water concentration to an area or a region of a lower water concentration. We must highlight the key words here, so we have to say about the movement of the water molecules. We have to say it goes across a partially permeable membrane, and we have to say it goes from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration. Question 2. The diagrams show the same cell of a common pond plant. Diagram A shows the cell in a hypotonic solution. Diagram B shows the same cell in a hypertonic solution. What is a hypertonic solution, worth 2 marks. Let's have a look at the diagrams. So diagram A is hypotonic. Key things we've learnt about hypotonic are water moves into the cell and makes the cell expand. So if it makes the cell expand, it means it will make the cell turgid. For hypertonic, things that we remembered, the water molecules move out of the cell, makes the cell shrink, and the word we referred to for plant cells was flaccid. So for our question, hypertonic, the water is moving out of the cell. It means the solute is more concentrated outside of the cell. So the water will move out of the cell and the plant will become flaccid. What word is used to describe plant cells placed in hypotonic? B, part 2, hypertonic. Turgid in hypertonic we said was flaccid. We can also use another word, plasmolysed. First part we're going to write turgid and the second part flaccid. Linking word for today is water. Whenever we think of water, we should think of osmosis. Whenever we think of osmosis, we should think of movement of water. When we think of the movement of water, we should think of going from a high concentration to a low water concentration. We should also think of partially permeable membrane. When we think of partially permeable membrane, we should think of water and sugar. Thank you for watching. Join me on my next video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel.